5 years ago, we witnessed a landmark international pact. Political leaders, propelled by the demands of the people, promised to tackle the climate emergency. The movement to secure the Paris Agreement started long before COP21. While it was governments who signed the final accords, the role of civil society was critical over many years in the run-up to that moment. The Paris Agreement is by no means perfect, but the relentless advocacy of civil society ensured that important elements of the treaty were included. Elements like the 1.5 temperature goal, a lifeline for the survival for the most vulnerable countries. The need to address loss and damage as a key pillar of protecting those on the front line of the very worst climate impacts. The importance of climate finance and the importance of equity in climate action. 5 years ago, 150 countries put initial national targets and plans on the table and promised to update them this year, in 2020. To date, only a few leaders have done so. The robust 5-year cycle to update national climate targets, the ratchet mechanism, is the beating heart of the Paris Agreement. Yet most major emitters and rich countries have prioritised long-term targets over short-term goals and actions. We are in a climate emergency. Decisive action in the next 5 years is imperative. We need national climate targets based on science to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And we need targets that adhere to principles of fair shares and equity. We need developed countries to meet their financial obligations and to address finance for loss and damage.
Major emitters like the UK, New Zealand, Denmark, Japan, France, and others have declared 2050 net zero targets. But unless these are backed by ambitious 2030 plans that stop all fossil fuel production and subsidies, transition to renewables, drastically cut domestic emissions, and enhance support to vulnerable countries, these risk just becoming a smokescreen. Developed countries like my own here in the US are nowhere near on track to meet the $100 billion a year of climate finance that was promised, with almost 80% of climate finance in 2017 and 2018 provided through loans. Climate finance must not add another layer of debt to poor countries whose economies are already struggling from the pandemic and who are at risk of defaulting. We also need COP26 to deliver an outcome on long-term post-2025 finance, taking into account vulnerabilities and adaptation needs. Developed countries must increase their funding for adaptation and resilience building for communities on the front lines. A COP26 priority should also be a strong package on global solidarity, including a high-level political dialogue on loss and damage to establish specific financial channels that address loss and damage and make big polluters pay.
With 1 degree temperature rise globally and COVID pandemic spread across, we have seen that multi-hazard situation is the new normal. The resilience that we have built of communities in last so many years has been compromised. On top of it, the government, as economic recovery plan for COVID-19, has decided to invest into fossil fuel industry, has decided to invest into polluted sectors and sectors which emits high greenhouse gases. While this would have been a great opportunity to move towards just transition, that this would have been a great opportunity to build a future that is resilient of greenhouse gases in atmosphere. Having said that, we have also seen that Paris Agreement is an excellent step in the right direction. It is an excellent example of multilateral action, but we have also seen that how many governments have broken their promises. For example, UK has gone back from 0.7 GNI to 0.5% GNI as an aid budget. We do hope that countries will continue to fulfill their commitments and they will continue to strengthen the Paris Agreement. And as civil society, we'll continue to hold our governments accountable.
5 years ago, on December 12, 2015, world leaders agreed on the Paris Agreement. By doing so, they made a promise to the world, to those at the front lines, and to all future generations to tackle the climate emergency and limit global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees. Since then, leaders worldwide have still failed to treat the climate crisis as a crisis. After 5 years, we understand that there is clearly no point in simply asking our leaders to live up to the promise they made in Paris. It is time for us to make our own promises.
We are already experiencing what a 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer world looks like. And it is already a catastrophe. It is burning. It is melting. It is flooding. Species are going extinct. People are drowning and dying of thirst.
We are getting closer and closer to disastrous and irreversible tipping points. In the absence of leadership, we are making this promise to each other and to the planet. We will demand change and accountability. We will fight for the world we want.
The science is clear about the consequences of global heating reaching 2 degrees, yet leaders still discuss it as a target. This is unacceptable. The current reality of 1.2 degrees is already inhumane and atrocious.
World leaders have no right to speak about net zero by 2050 as if this is the height of ambition. Limiting our ambition to net zero by 2050 is a death sentence for many. It's a slap in our face that when the pandemic hit, our leaders' priority was to bail out fossil fuel industry, not those at the front lines of this crisis. The so-called leaders have no right to speak about ambition.
The need for rapid, fundamental system change is clear. Until we have systems in place to protect the people and the planet, everyone but the wealthiest is faced with increased uncertainty and poverty. The transition does not just have to be faster, but also fairer for the many and not the few. We cannot go back to normal because normality was already a crisis of inequality, destruction of nature and climate. Those who did not notice are just too privileged to do so. The system is not broken. It was built to be unjust.
Decision makers have a choice to make. Meanwhile, more and more people are realizing that all the risks and injustices that the world is experiencing have the same root causes. More and more people are tapping into what many of us have forgotten. A sense of unity as we stand up for a fairer, cleaner, safer, and a healthier world.
Our supposed leaders are not fighting for the well-being of this planet and its people. So we commit to go out on the streets, to yell, to strike, to build campaigns and form connections, to demand more and grow into more stronger and powerful movements until they are ready to fight with us and not against us.
It is up to us, the people, from across the globe, from every generation to organize, mobilize, and bring about the change we want to see in the world. We will not stop because we know we deserve a safe and just present and a green and sustainable future for all. We promise to keep fighting for the world we need, to fight for 1.5